My dear one, there is something I have been observing about the way you move through the world, not from a distance, from closer than that, from the interior position that belongs to the one who fashioned the very depths of you before anyone else arrived to form a single opinion about who you are. And what I have been watching is this. You have developed a particular way of making yourself smaller than your actual size, not dramatically, not in the way that would be obvious to anyone who happened to glance in your direction, in the specific, practiced, almost invisible way that a person does when they have spent years inside rooms that were not quite designed for someone exactly like them. You have learned to move around the edges, to not take up more space than you were given, to speak at the volume the room seemed to suggest was appropriate, to let your presence flatten just enough that it could pass through the ordinary doors of ordinary days without catching on anything, without drawing the kind of attention that might require you to explain yourself. You have become, in certain ways, expert at the art of being almost invisible. And the watching world has largely accepted this at face value, because the world takes most people at the size they present themselves. But I see your actual size. Before the world learned your name, I whispered it. I was the first one to say it, in the moment before the moment when you first became, in the conversation where everything that exists was called into its being. And I did not whisper something generic, something interchangeable, something that could have referred to any number of the other people I had already imagined and would later call into form. What I whispered was specific, particular to you, an identity that belongs to the singular shape of a singular soul, a shape that has never been duplicated in the entire history of what I have made, that will not be duplicated in everything still to come. The world may have given you a set of syllables for practical use, but what I whispered first is the one that actually tells the truth about you. And I have been saying it continuously ever since, into every room you have ever entered, even the rooms where you made yourself small, even the rooms where the volume of everything else made it difficult to hear. Your true calling has been in the air of every space you have inhabited. My voice has been the constant thread running through the noise of every day you have lived. You have simply not always been able to locate it underneath everything louder. Here is what I want to offer you in these words. Not a comfort, not a reassurance, something more specific than that. I want to offer you the experience of being genuinely, personally, specifically recognized, not as a category, not as one of the many, as yourself, the particular you, the you with the precise history you carry, the you with the exact texture of longing and weariness and quietly maintained hope that belongs to this specific season of your life. You have been living inside the anonymity that the world has been constructing around every one of its inhabitants for some time now, and within that anonymity, a particular hunger has been growing, not a hunger for fame or for general approval, a hunger far more intimate than either, the hunger to be actually known, to have someone see all the way in, past the surface presentation, past the carefully managed impressions, all the way into the real room, and say, I know exactly who you are. And I have not stopped choosing you. That is what I am saying, right now, directly to you, not through a broadcast that incidentally includes you in its sweep, through the particular channel that connects only what I am to only what you are, the channel that has never been shared with anyone else, that operates at a frequency I set when I made you, that I have been transmitting on continuously without interruption since the moment of your first breath. The world is loud. You already know this. It has been getting louder for a long time, and the loudness has taken on a specific quality in recent years. a quality of simultaneity, of everything demanding its place in your awareness at the same time, of every surface being a potential point of entry for something that wants your attention. The digital architecture of ordinary life has built itself around the assumption that a person's consciousness is available on demand, that the interior of a human being is a resource that can be accessed continuously without cost. And the cost has in fact been enormous, even if it has been difficult to measure, because it accumulates in ways that are slow and subtle rather than sudden and obvious. The cost shows up as a kind of inner flatness, as a diminishment of the clarity that used to make certain moments feel genuinely crisp, as a growing difficulty distinguishing between what matters and what has simply learned to approximate the feeling of mattering, as the particular sensation of a person who is surrounded by information about everything but remains, in the most essential way, profoundly unknown. Digital life connects billions of signals while leaving the soul that generates each signal in a curious kind of isolation. You can be visible to thousands of people in a given day. Your image, your words, the curated version of your experiences, and still spend that entire day without being genuinely seen by a single one of them. Because visibility is not the same as recognition. A screen can carry your face without carrying anything essential about you. A platform can amplify your output while remaining entirely indifferent to the person producing it. And a feed of content about your life can generate responses from people who feel, in some sense, connected to you, while you yourself feel the particular ache of someone who has been seen without being known. That ache is not a personal failing. It is the natural response of a soul designed for genuine recognition, living inside a system that delivers something that resembles recognition while providing nothing of its substance. The room you are sitting in right now is your actual location, not the virtual location, not the online presence, not the version of yourself that exists in the memory of every person who has ever encountered a projection of you. The room you are physically occupying, with its particular light and its particular air, and the specific texture of whatever you are resting against. This is where you actually are, and this is where I am speaking, not into a broadcast, into this room, into the space immediately around you, into the interior of the person reading these words in this exact location, with this exact set of circumstances behind them, and this exact set of uncertainties ahead. This is a personal conversation between the creator of the cosmos and one specific person who carries a name that was chosen and spoken before any star in any sky had been assigned to its place. Before any world knew you, I spoke you into being. That sentence is not poetry. It is a literal account of what happened. Before the biological cascade of your existence began, before the parents who named you had chosen the syllables they would write on the paperwork, before the first heartbeat, before the first breath, before the first cry that announced to the surrounding room that someone new had arrived, there was a moment in which I said who you were, not the syllables your parents chose, a deeper truth. The word that corresponds to the one-of-a-kind reality of who you actually are, what I have been using in every conversation I have had about you since that first speaking, what I will speak again on the day when all the noise of all the screens and all the systems of all the ages finally falls quiet and you hear me saying it directly into whatever you are. That day is coming, but this one is here. And in this one, I am saying it again, into the ordinary room of an ordinary day, directly to the person who has been living inside a world that has not always handled her true identity with sufficient care. There are people in your life who know your name, who have spoken it hundreds of times, who associate it with the set of characteristics they have observed in you, with the role you play in the specific configuration of their particular world, with the history you have shared. And that knowing has real value. There is genuine beauty in the way a spoken identity can carry memory, can carry affection, can carry the accumulated texture of years of shared experience. What you are called, voiced by someone who loves you, is not a small thing. But there is a knowing that goes beyond what the people who love you most are capable of. Not because their love is insufficient, it is magnificent for what it is, but because there are depths in you that no horizontal relationship has ever reached. There are rooms in the interior of who you are that you have never opened to another person, some because the right moment never came, some because you were not sure you were safe enough, some because you did not quite trust that what was in those rooms would survive being seen by someone else. Those rooms have not been empty. I have been in them. I have known exactly what is in every one of them since before you were old enough to lock the doors, and nothing in any of those rooms has diminished what I see when I look at you. Every single room, including the ones you considered most problematic, most shameful, most difficult to let light into, I have been in all of them, and in all of them, I called you by the true identity I chose for you. The word that does not change based on the contents of the room. What does it mean, in practical terms, for your actual life, that you are known at that depth? Let me describe what it is, Navathur, because clearing away the misunderstanding will make space for the real thing to settle. It does not mean that your struggles are monitored and cataloged by a cosmic administrative system that is gathering data on your compliance or your failures. It does not mean that you are under surveillance by a presence that is comparing you to a standard you have not been meeting. It does not mean that the knowing is accompanied by a list of corrections. The knowing I am describing is the knowing of a father for a child he made with intention and continues to regard with delight. Not despite complexity, but inclusive of it. Not ignoring the difficult parts of who you are, but holding even those with the same care that the easy parts receive. To be known in the way I'm describing is to experience the full relief of having nothing to prove, nothing to hide, nothing to manage, nothing to perform. Because the one who already knows everything has not moved, has not recoiled, has not issued a revised assessment based on a more thorough examination of the data, has simply continued to say the name, continued to choose the person, continued to be fully present to every detail of a life that is fully visible. The relief of that is staggering if you allow yourself to actually feel it rather than processing it at the level of agreeable information. Because so much of the energy you expend in ordinary life goes toward the maintenance of some version of yourself that is acceptable in the current context. In every room you enter, something in you does a rapid environmental reading. Who is here? What do they expect? What version of me is most appropriate? Which parts of myself should move to the front and which should stay back? This is not vanity. It is the reasonable adaptation of a social creature to the requirements of social space, but it is also exhausting in ways that are rarely fully acknowledged, because the exhaustion is so constant that it has become the background of consciousness rather than a foreground experience. You have been managing impressions so long and so automatically that you may not realize how much of your available energy disappears into that management every single day. In my presence, that work stops. There is no impression to manage. There is no version of yourself to construct for the occasion. There is no environmental reading required, because the environment already knows you at a depth that none of the micro adjustments of self-presentation can affect. You can arrive in my presence as the exact, actual, interior thing you are on this particular day, in this particular state, with this particular accumulation of everything the previous days have deposited in you, and the reception will be the same, not indifferent, warm, specific, welcoming the actual you rather than any version of you that has been assembled for the occasion. What I speak in that reception is your real identity, not your public label, the one I whispered first. Now, let me go directly into what I have been observing about the particular texture of the invisibility you have been living inside, because the anonymity I am speaking of is not simply the general condition of being one person among many in a large world. It has a specific quality for you. It is personal. You have moved through seasons in which you expected to be recognized and were not. Moments where you brought something real into a room and watched it go unreceived. Not because the room was hostile. Sometimes the most painful version of invisibility occurs in rooms that are perfectly friendly. Rooms where the people would readily assure you that they see you, that they value you, that you matter to them, and still something in you walks out of those rooms carrying the quiet ache of having been present without being truly located, of having spoken without being fully heard, of having given something of yourself and not been quite sure it landed anywhere that could hold it. That ache is not a sign of excessive neediness or misplaced expectation. That ache is the accurate report of a soul that was made for a specific kind of recognition and has been living with the substitutes. Every human being who has ever felt that ache is reporting something true about the structure of their own nature. You were made by someone who sees you at a depth no human relationship can replicate. The hunger for that seeing is woven into the design. It was meant to point you toward the source of the only recognition that actually goes all the way down, not to make human love seem small. It is not small, but to ensure that you always know where the deepest recognition comes from, so that you cannot finally satisfy the deepest need anywhere except in the place where it was meant to be satisfied. So that every experience of being incompletely known by people who genuinely love you eventually walks you back in the direction of the one who knows you completely, who has never found you incomplete, who has been whispering your identity into every empty feeling room you have ever occupied. I see you in those rooms. My gaze rests on you every time you adjust your size to fit a space that was not quite the right shape for you. Every time you said the thing that was easier to say instead of the thing that was true. Every time you laughed at the moment when the honest response would have been silence. Every time you stayed a little longer than you wanted to because leaving would have required an explanation you did not have the energy to give. I was in all of those moments, watching not with disappointment, but with the particular tenderness of someone who knows exactly why you make the adjustments you make, who understands every history that produced every habit of self-protection, who has never required you to stop protecting yourself before approaching me. The accommodations you have made to survive certain relationships and certain rooms were never invisible to me. I held every one of them alongside you, and not one of them changed what I call you. Before the world learned your name, I whispered it. There it is again. Not as repetition for its own sake, as anchor, as the sentence you can return to when the day's particular version of invisibility is pressing in, as the fact underneath every experience of going unrecognized. Whatever room you are in when the ache of being incompletely seen rises in your chest, this is still true in that room. The one who speaks your deepest name is also in that room, has never been absent from any room you have entered, has been saying your name in every one of them with equal clarity and equal warmth. The rooms that felt empty were not empty. You simply could not always hear it above the volume of everything else. Let me move deeper into what it means that I speak your identity. Not just that I know it. Knowing who you are can be a passive thing, a piece of information, a data point. Speaking it is different. Speaking it is an active, ongoing, intentional act of recognition. Every time I call you by the word I chose for you, and I have been doing this without interruption since before you were born, I am doing something. I am calling the full reality of who you are into the space of my attention. I am affirming that what you are is real, is particular, is worthy of direct address, is worth the specificity of a true calling rather than the convenience of a category. To address someone with genuine intention is to insist that they are not interchangeable, not generic, not just a representative of a type. It is to say, you, specifically, you, distinguished from everyone else by the singular shape of what you are. You, with your specific history, and your specific longing, and your specific way of responding to beauty, and your specific way of flinching from pain, and your specific version of courage, and your specific shape of faith. You. Your identity was established long before the weight of the current season had a chance to redefine it. The things that have been heavy in your recent days, the uncertainties you have been navigating, the relational complexities you have been managing, the internal weather that has been less than clear, none of these constitute a revision of who you are at the foundational level. The weight of what you are currently carrying is real. I am not diminishing it by pointing to something deeper. I am simply insisting that the deeper thing is also real and that it does not fluctuate with the surface weather. Your worth did not decrease when the last difficult thing happened. Your identity did not become less clear when clarity became harder to access. What I whispered before the world began to form its opinions about you is the same word I am speaking now, during a season that has done its best to make you question whether you are as valuable, as seen, as known as you sometimes allow yourself to believe. The answer has not changed. You are as known as you have ever been. You are as specifically, personally recognized as you were on the day I first called you into being. Not 1 degree less, not 1 layer fewer. The knowing is total, and the knowing is now. Here is something I want to say about the prayers that never made it to words. The ones that formed themselves in the chest and dissolved before they could be shaped into sentences. The ones that were too tangled, too contradictory, too heavy to be assembled into the kind of articulate petition that seems like it would be worth bringing to anyone, even to me. You have had those prayers, many of them. The ones that lived as a kind of wordless pressure somewhere between the lungs and the throat. The ones that arrived in the small hours when the ordinary management of the day had finally paused enough to let the unmanaged things surface. The ones that were not requests so much as sounds. Sounds you made internally without quite knowing what they were asking for. Sounds that were simply the authentic expression of a soul under a weight it had not yet learned to name. Those prayers were received, every single one. The ones you considered too incoherent to offer, the ones that felt too small, too large, too inconsistent, too repetitive, too fragmented to constitute something worth presenting. I received every wordless sound of every night when the thing you could not name finally came close enough to the surface to make itself felt. I received every half-formed reach towards something beyond what the situation contained. I received every moment in which you wanted to say something to me and could not find the language. The absence of words was not a barrier. It was a different language, and I have been fluent in it longer than language has existed. What those prayers told me was not what they explicitly said. They did not explicitly say much. What they told me was the truth of your interior, what was actually happening in the rooms that the daylight version of you keeps organized and presentable. What those prayers contained was the unedited report from the places in you that have not been performing for anyone. And those places are the ones I most want to reach. Not the performance, the person behind it, not the version that has been assembled for consumption, the one that shows up in the wordless sounds of the real moments. That person is the one I address by her true identity, not the managed version, the actual one. The one who does not yet fully believe she is worthy of a direct communication from the source of all things. That is the one I am talking to right now. You may have wondered, in some of those dark, small hour moments, whether your prayers were landing anywhere, whether the words, or the wordless sounds that stood in for words, were simply dissolving into a silence that had no particular attention on the other side of it. That wondering is understandable. Silence is a genuinely ambiguous thing. It can mean absence. It can also mean presence that does not require noise to be real. The silence you received in the aftermath of those prayers was not the silence of an empty room. It was the silence of a room where the only presence was paying full attention, complete attention, the kind that does not speak immediately because it is fully engaged with what it has just received, turning it over, holding it carefully, knowing what is in it and what the one who brought it actually needs, not in response to the surface content of the prayer, but in response to the whole person whose interior that prayer was honest about. Every moment you spent in what felt like unseen prayer was actually a moment of intense, particular, personal observation. My eyes were on you in those moments with a specificity that no human gaze can duplicate, not managing many things at once, not dividing attention among competing demands, fully present to one specific soul in one specific moment of genuine, unguarded need. And what I saw, what I am still seeing, in every moment that follows those moments, as the days and seasons accumulate around you, has not produced anything other than recognition and love, not assessment, not revised evaluation, not conditional regard that depends on whether the prayer was sufficiently coherent or sufficiently believing or sufficiently free of the doubt that was also present in those moments alongside everything else. Love, specific, personal, continuous, the love of someone who was looking for you before you knew you were lost, who found you before you knew you were being searched for, who has not for one moment allowed your sense of being invisible to become confused with the reality of being seen. The tears that came in private, the ones you cried in spaces where no one was watching, where you had finally stopped performing the version of yourself that does not need to cry. I saw everyone, not as data, with the full emotional weight of what each one cost you. I understand what it costs a person to cry alone. I understand what it means to release something in solitude that cannot be released in company. I understand the particular combination of relief and grief that comes with genuine private tears, the relief of finally setting something down, the grief of not having anyone to set it down with. Both. I saw both, and neither required me to do anything other than be present to them, because sometimes presence is the most important thing. And presence I have given without interruption, without absence, without the limitations that every human presence eventually runs into. You have been carrying the subtle burden of feeling like your grief was not witnessed, like the things that were hard in a room where the difficulty went unacknowledged, not always dramatically unacknowledged. Sometimes the people around you meant well, sometimes they tried. Sometimes they said the right words, even if they could not say them in quite the right way. But the deepest witnessing, the kind that reaches all the way in, that sees what is actually happening rather than what it looks like from a friendly distance. That kind of witnessing requires a seeing that human beings simply cannot offer one another at depth, because every human being is navigating their own interior at the same time, and the navigation takes up most of the available attention. What was happening in the real interior of your private difficulty was not unseen by me, even when it was unseen by everyone else. I want that to reach you. I want the part of you that normalized carrying things without acknowledgement to receive the news that the acknowledgement was always there. The witness was always present. You have never been in the room alone. Something shifts in a person when they truly receive this, not a dramatic shift. Something more like a slow exhale after a long period of held breath. The posture changes slightly. The shoulders that have been braced against the ongoing uncertainty of whether anyone is actually paying attention to this specific life begin to release by degrees, not all at once. The habits of bracing are deep, and they do not dissolve in a single moment of received truth, but the direction changes. The posture that has been turned toward the work of making oneself seen and valued by the available eyes gradually begins to reorient toward the permanent witness that has never required the turning, toward the attention that was already fully given before you tried to earn it, toward the recognition that does not depend on your performance of recognizability. That reorientation is what I am inviting you into, not a single dramatic moment of surrender. A gradual, consistent choosing to believe that the identity I have been affirming is the truest report on who you are. A daily practice of returning to the recognition before you return to the performance. Beginning each day, not in the posture of someone who needs to earn the right to be seen, but in the posture of someone who has already been seen, completely, personally, specifically, by the one whose seeing matters most. And that posture, practiced over time, changes everything downstream from it. How you enter a room, what you bring to the relationships you are part of, how much energy remains available for the people around you after the energy of self-management has been released. How generous you can be with what you have when you are no longer investing so much of it in the maintenance of an impression. Now, let me speak about what it means that I not only know your name, but chose it. This is where the knowing moves from recognition into something more intimate still. Recognition could theoretically be passive, an awareness that exists without particular investment in what it observes. But what I have for you is not passive knowing. It is active, ongoing, freely repeated choice. I chose you specifically, not the type you belong to, not the category your characteristics place you in, not the version of you that presents well in ordinary social transactions. You, the full particular you that I know because I made every part of it with intention. The choosing was not a single historical event in the past, a decision made at the beginning of things that now simply extends forward by default. It is renewed in every moment. In the moment you are in right now, I am choosing you, not because you have done anything in this specific moment to merit it, because choosing you is the expression of what I am and what I made you to be. You are mine in the most generous sense of that word, not possessed against your will, but belonging to the family that was built specifically around you, that had your particular place in it, designed before you arrived to take it up. Let me dwell here a little longer, because the meaning of that choosing needs room to breathe before it can settle into the places in you where it is most needed. The culture you live inside understands choosing primarily as a response to merit. You choose a path because it has demonstrated its value. You choose a person for a relationship because they have shown themselves to be worth the investment. You choose to remain loyal because the loyalty has been rewarded. In most of the choosing that happens in ordinary human life, the choice follows the evidence. What makes the choosing I am describing so different, so difficult for a human mind to fully absorb, is that it preceded the evidence entirely. Before you had done anything, before you had demonstrated anything, before there was a record that would justify a reasonable investment of divine attention, the choice was already made, not reluctantly, not as an obligation, with the full, freely given intention of the one who makes the choice, because the choice is an expression of his own nature, not a response to the worthiness of the chosen. What this means for the interior question you have been carrying, the question of whether you are really worth this kind of specific, personal, costly attention, is that the question has been answered outside the framework of worthiness entirely. The answer is not that you are worthy. The answer is that worthiness is not the relevant category. I did not choose you because you cleared a bar. I chose you because I made you, and I love what I make. That is the entire logic. And the logic cannot be undone by your failures or your doubts or your seasons of distance or your moments of wondering whether this kind of recognition was ever really meant for someone with your particular history and your particular complications. None of those things entered into the choosing. They were all still in your future when the choice was already past. The choosing was done before any of your history existed, and it has not been revised by the history that has accumulated since. This is the news that changes the interior condition of a person who receives it, not information that improves the existing framework, a completely different framework, one in which your worthiness is not the operating variable, one in which the question of whether you deserve this kind of love is the wrong question, not because you do not deserve it, but because deserving is simply not the mechanism by which it works. It works by grace. Pure, prior, pre-existing grace, the kind that was established before your first breath and will continue after your last. Grace that does not require calibration based on your performance, that does not ebb when you have had a bad week or a difficult season, that does not strengthen when you manage to be your better self and weaken when you fall short of it. The grace is constant. The choosing is constant. The speaking of your identity is constant. What varies is only your awareness of it. And awareness can be recovered at any point by the simple and available act of turning toward what has never stopped being here. Family is the right image for what this is, not the idealized version of family that sometimes appears in cultural imagination, perfect, uncomplicated, free from the friction that actual relationships always carry. The real version, the family that knows the difficult things about its members and has not sent anyone away on account of them. The family that has been present through the ugly seasons and has not revised its assessment of who belongs. The family that speaks a member's identity in their absence with the same warmth it uses in their presence, because the warmth does not depend on what the absent person is currently doing to justify it. That is the family you belong to. That has always been your family. You did not earn your place in it. You were not admitted on the strength of an application. You were created with a place in it, already designed for the exact shape of you, and nothing you have done since your creation has revoked the reservation. In a family that actually functions like a family, there is no performance required for belonging. You do not need to bring your best version to the table every time you arrive. You do not need to have resolved your current struggle before you are welcome at the gathering. You can arrive depleted, confused, uncertain, quieter than you were the last time, more burdened than you wish you were, less sure of yourself than the version of you that exists in your better moments. And the place that has your true identity on it is still yours. The family that loves you does not give your chair away because you did not come in strong. The chair is yours. Your calling is written on it. And the identities that matter in this family were spoken before the world began. Before any world knew you, I spoke you into being, in the moment that constituted your beginning, in the breath before the breath, in the instant that preceded every instant that followed. There was a word, yours alone, said with the full intention of what I am, into the substance of what I was making. That saying was a claim, not the possessive, limiting kind of claim that human ownership implies, the generous, life-giving kind. The claim that means I have placed myself in responsibility for this particular life, that I will be present to it, that I will not abandon it at the moments when it most needs what I have, that I will speak this word over every room this person ever enters, so that even if no one else in the room can hear it, the word is still in the air, still real, still the truest thing being said about who stands inside it. You are standing inside a room right now. Your identity is alive in the air of it, not theoretically, actually. The same presence that spoke your personhood into being is in the room you are occupying, not a memory of a divine event that happened once in the ancient past. Alive, active, present speaking, happening in real time, directed at the real you who is real in this real moment. If you have felt unseen, I want you to receive this as the correction of a misperception rather than the consolation of a nice thought. The misperception is that the invisibility you have been experiencing corresponds to a reality. It does not. What corresponds to reality is this: you are the most thoroughly known person in the room, not by the people in it. They may or may not see you with clarity, and their capacity to see is limited in the ways all human capacity is limited, but by the one who made the room, by the one who made you, by the one who has been voicing your truest identity into every room you have ever stood in, sometimes quietly enough that the noise covered it, but never with less love than the first time it was spoken. There is something particularly powerful about receiving this, not in a season of personal triumph, but in a season where the evidence of ordinary life has been pointing elsewhere. When things are going well and the relational feedback is warm and the work is bearing visible fruit and the body is healthy and the people you love are steady, in those seasons, believing in divine recognition does not require much. The evidence and the belief point in the same direction. But in the seasons where the evidence is ambiguous or contrary, where the relational feedback has been inconsistent, where the work has not borne the fruit you hoped, where something essential has gone unseen or unreceived, in those seasons, believing that you are recognized by the source of all things is a form of courage, a quiet courage. The courage of holding on to what is most deeply true when the surface of things is not confirming it. That courage is what I am asking of you, and it is a courage that does not need to be generated from your own interior resources alone. Draw it from the same place that is the subject of what you are drawing courage to believe. The recognition sustains the courage to believe in the recognition. You can enter the cycle at any point. Now I want to speak about the performance, not a theatrical performance, the one you have been putting on in the interior of your own life, the performance of being sufficiently okay, sufficiently put together spiritually, sufficiently managing in the ways that a person who trusts God is supposed to manage. The performance that happens in the space between what you actually feel and what you have decided to present as your spiritual condition, not out of dishonesty, but out of the completely understandable desire to not be a burden, to not be the person who is always struggling, to not require more grace than you imagine is available for someone in your position. That performance is exhausting in ways you may have stopped noticing because the exhaustion has become so normalized. And what I want to tell you about it is not that the performance has been wrong, or that you have been failing by maintaining it. What I want to tell you is that it is unnecessary. Not just that it is unhelpful to you, though it is, but that it is genuinely unnecessary, because I have never been waiting for you to achieve the spiritual composure that the performance was constructed to project. The version of you that exists in the performance is not more acceptable to me than the version that exists before the performance begins. The version that wakes up in the morning before the adjustments are made and the face is constructed and the day's approach to being okay is assembled. That version is the one I am most interested in. Not because I want you to suffer, because I want to meet the actual you, not the person you have been working to become, the person you already are. Relief is the word I want to give you. The relief of letting the performance stop, not necessarily in the eyes of the world. The world has its own requirements, and navigating them requires some degree of the adjustment that goes by the name of social function. But in the interior, in the private conversation between what you actually are and the one who made you, in that conversation, the performance can simply stop, because everything the performance was designed to conceal has already been seen. The rooms the performance was designed to keep presentable are already known in their actual condition, and the knowing has produced not a revised assessment of your worth, but a continuous, unmodified speaking of who you truly are, not the version you perform for the occasion, your actual self, the one that corresponds to the word I first whispered. There is a specific kind of lightness that arrives in a person who has stopped trying to be seen in a way they can control and has simply allowed themselves to be seen in the way they actually are. The energy that was going into the maintenance of the impression is suddenly available for other things, for genuine presence with the people around you, for actual listening rather than the partial listening of someone who is simultaneously managing their own output, for a kind of creativity that had been crowded out by the ongoing work of self-presentation, for noticing beauty in the ordinary, which requires a certain receptivity that the performance mode makes difficult to access, for rest, the actual kind, not the performative kind where you tell yourself you are resting while your mind continues its management. The real rest that comes to a person who has genuinely put something down. The strength that comes from this kind of surrender is different from the strength of achievement. It does not feel like a mountain climbed. It feels more like a door unlocked, like a window opened in a room that had been sealed too long, like breath that reaches further into the lungs than you had remembered breath could reach. Not dramatic, but undeniable. Something in the interior that was constricted begins to release, and from that release, a way of being in the world becomes available that was not available while the constriction held. A way of giving that comes from receiving rather than from straining. A way of loving that is full rather than contingent. A way of showing up to the ordinary days of an ordinary life that does not require the day to be going well in order to be genuinely inhabited. This is what I am offering you as the alternative to the performance, not a better performance, not a more authentic version of the managed self, the actual self, recognized completely, required to manage nothing, free to simply be what it is in the presence of the one who chose it. That freedom is not something you have to earn your way into. It is the natural condition of a person who has received, all the way down into the believing part of them, the news that they have already been chosen, that their identity has already been declared, that their place in the family has already been set, that the recognition they have been longing for has never been withheld, only partially obscured by the noise of everything that was competing for their attention in the rooms where the speaking was happening. Let me speak now about what it looks like to carry this recognition forward. not to treat it as a private consolation that stays in the interior and produces no visible change, as a lived reality that changes the way you inhabit the world. What does a person who genuinely knows they are recognized by the Creator do differently than a person still searching for that recognition? Not dramatically different things, perhaps. The ordinary texture of their days contains the same ingredients, but the quality of how those ordinary things are inhabited is changed throughout. The person who knows they are named moves through a room differently than the person who is still working to establish that their presence is worth noticing, not arrogantly, not with the performance of confidence that is really just a different kind of seeking, with the quiet assurance of someone who is not in the room to be evaluated, who is not performing for the judgment of the other occupants, who can turn full attention outward because the inward question of their own worth is not consuming their available resources. That turning outward is a gift to every person in the room, because you know what it is to be in the company of someone who is genuinely present, not half present, not present in the body while partly occupied with the management of their own image. Genuinely, fully present, listening in a way that makes you feel actually heard, seeing you in a way that makes you feel actually seen. That quality of presence is not reserved for the naturally gifted or the spiritually advanced. It is the natural result of a person who has been freed from the ongoing labor of establishing their own recognizability and can therefore offer the full resource of their attention to whoever is in front of them. You can be that person in your ordinary life, not because you have achieved spiritual mastery, but because you have received what has already been given. The recognition has already been given. Your place in the family has already been spoken over you. You do not have to be in the room establishing anything. You can simply be in the room for the sake of the room and the people in it, from a ground of security that does not require anything from them to remain intact. Wandering without a recognized identity and walking as a chosen child are two different experiences of the same world, the same streets, the same rooms, the same faces of the same people in the same configurations of ordinary life, but the interior from which all of that is met is fundamentally different. The wanderer is in the world looking for what the chosen child has already been given, looking for evidence of belonging, looking for a recognition that will finally feel complete, looking for their identity to be confirmed by the right person in the right way at the right moment so that the hunger can be satisfied. And the looking takes the wanderer in circles because the satisfaction they are seeking is not available in the places they are looking. The world cannot satisfy the hunger that was designed to be satisfied by what the world is not. But the chosen child, the child who has received the news of their belonging, who has allowed the recognition to land somewhere deeper than the level of agreeable information, that child moves through the same world, not looking for what they already have, but bringing it, bringing the peace of the already recognized, bringing the security of the already chosen, bringing the particular quality of settled attention that belongs to a person who is not in the situation to be evaluated, but to be present. This is the transition I am speaking you into. Not from wandering to arrived. You have always been found, even when you felt most lost. From living as though you were wandering to living as though you are what you have always been. Known, named, chosen, placed in a family with your particular chair, spoken to directly by the voice that spoke the universe into existence, recognized at a depth that goes all the way down and finds nothing there that warrants anything less than love. Consider what it means for the days ahead that you carry this specific knowledge rather than its general approximation. There is a difference between knowing in the abstract that God is aware of human beings and knowing with the personal specificity that you are addressed directly. The first kind of knowing is a theological position. It can be held without much consequence in the daily interior of a life. The second kind is a different thing entirely. It is the kind that changes where you look when the doubt rises. Instead of looking for external confirmation that you are worth attending to, you return to the prior truth that the attending was never conditional on what you produced or presented. Instead of waiting for the right person to see you clearly, you acknowledge that the clearest seeing has already occurred and is occurring continuously. Instead of performing the version of yourself most likely to earn recognition, you simply offer the actual version, incomplete, unpolished, and entirely known by the one whose knowing has never wavered. The practical effect of this shift is not a life that suddenly becomes easier. The challenges in your life do not dissolve because you have received the news of your recognition. What changes is the register in which you face those challenges. You face them as someone who is addressed, attended to, personally known by the source of all things, and that changes the interior quality of the facing, not the difficulty of what is being faced, but the depth from which the facing occurs. From that deeper place, a kind of courage becomes available that the surface does not have access to. The courage of a person who does not need the outcome to confirm their worth, because their worth is already confirmed by something that does not shift with outcomes. That is the courage I am placing in your hands. Receive it as the gift it is. The expiration date of your invisibility is now. I want to be clear about this. The invisibility you have been living inside is not a permanent condition. It is not the truth about what you are. It has been the experience of a person who did not yet have full access to the knowledge of how thoroughly she is seen. That knowledge is available right now, in this moment, in this room, to the person reading these words and receiving it, truly receiving it, past the level of information and into the level of living reality, constitutes the end of the invisibility. Not because the world will suddenly see you perfectly. The world seeing will continue to be what it is, incomplete, inconsistent, partial in all the ways human seeing is always partial, but the ache of being unseen will begin to change its character. Instead of the ache of a person who has no one looking, it will begin to feel more like the ache of a person who misses a specific someone. The ache of distance rather than the ache of abandonment, and distance can be crossed. The cross has already been made. The way back to the recognition that was always there is shorter than the wandering has made it feel. Carry this with you now, not as a memory of a message you once received, as a present reality that accompanies you into the rooms that are ahead, into the conversations that will happen before the day is over, and the ones that will happen in all the days that follow, into the moments when the anonymity of ordinary life presses in again, as it will, because the world has not changed its architecture overnight, and the noise that covers the recognition will continue to be there. In all of those moments, bring this with you. The one who speaks your identity is speaking it into the room. The recognition that goes all the way down is in effect. You are not anonymous here. You are the most thoroughly known person in the space. And the knowing is not passive or distant. It is warm, it is active, it is specifically directed at you, and it does not diminish for an instant regardless of what the surrounding evidence appears to suggest. Before the world learned your name, I whispered it. I have been saying it ever since. I am saying it now. Into the particular room of your particular day, with the full particularity of what I am speaking, into the full particularity of what you are. Nothing generic about this. Nothing broadcast in the general direction of anyone who might be listening. This message was meant for the specific person who received it, in the specific moment they received it, with the specific interior they were carrying when these words arrived. That is you. Your name is in these words. The recognition is in these words. And when you put this message down and return to the ordinary texture of your ordinary life, take this with you as the thing that does not change. You are named. You are known. You have always been both, and nothing the world has to say about your visibility or your worth revises what I declared over you before the world had the chance to say anything at all. Amen. If these words found you in a season of feeling invisible or unseen, stay with them a moment before returning to the day. You do not have to generate a particular feeling for the recognition to be real. Simply let it settle. Save this message and return to it on the hardest days when the ache of going unseen rises again in your chest. The one who whispered your identity before the world began will still be speaking it into whatever room you occupy. If this reached something in you that has been waiting to be reached, think of one person you know who has been quietly disappearing inside their own life and send this to them. Subscribe and stay close. There is always more to receive.